I got the finishing tape here on the top of the vertical fin trimmed out. Rolled this piece over a little bit from the left side to the right, and then from the right side over to the left, overlap it, and then brought the top down. Did the same on the back. So that finishes that out. I just have to wait now for that to cure up to finish it. To get it to stay down, I'm going to need to wait for the poly brush to set up and form that down with the iron. Well, I think that finishes up all of the taping. Well, the next step is to go over everything with the iron and smooth out all of the seams and stuff like that, and the tapes and everything, and then we'll mask it, and then we're going to build a paint booth down in the hangar and move this thing down to the hangar. We got a spray coat of poly brush on it with the spray gun, and then a couple coats of poly spray, and then the finish color. I'm going to glue tapes on one more spot, and I don't have to do that. It's not something that's necessary. This is the Piper channel here. There's that real thin channel, and I've got fabric and tape over this, and that aluminum panel then fits over this, but it also fits over this piece here, and this is steel. Even though I've got it all painted up and everything, and the aluminum painted up that goes over this, it's still aluminum over steel, and a chance of some abrasion and stuff, some fretting there as things work. So I think I'm going to take some tape. I'm just going to glue it over these sections here where this panel rests on. There's the channels here, and then across the bottom, and I just think I'm going to go ahead and coat those over with fabric. I'm not going to try to wrap this or anything. I'm just going to run the fabric down that and glue it on, and then just trim it off with the razor, just flush with that and everything. Just mostly for anti-chafing. Went ahead and glued some tape onto those stringers there, those little that cage. So I'll let that cure up, and then I'll trim this up with the razor. It's not a big deal. It could be like that, it doesn't matter, but anyway, that should provide some anti-chafing, some cushion between those aluminum panels and the U-channels there. Well, the covering is just about done. Got all the taping done. Got all the patch, the doublers and stuff like that put in where they were going, the doilies, whatever the hell they're called, that go on all those places where I've got penetrations, like up there through the wing root. Got all of those covered up and glued on. I took some rags saturated with reducer and went over the whole fuselage and cleaned up all my little drips and runs and the areas where I had a whole lot of extra poly brush on, these places where I've got a whole bunch of tapes that come together and overlap, like there where the landing gear attach fittings and the seaplane attach fittings are, and up there on the wing root where I've got several places where several tapes come together, and back here on the tail where we've got all of that busy stuff back there. There was a lot of crap back there, a lot of extra poly brush here and there. Got it all cleaned up. I've got a couple of grommets to put on. I've got to put the seaplane grommets on, so I'm going to have to roll it over on its side there so I can figure out where to put the seaplane grommets. There's a grommet that goes up there on the rear landing gear spar attach fittings, or strut, wing strut attach fittings and rear landing gear attach fitting. There's a grommet that goes on there where the aileron control cable comes out. I glued this one on back here. This is where the rudder cables are supposed to come out. I glued that one on after I had the fabric on while I was measuring everything out for all of those grommets that go around the inspection covers for the tail, the handhold covers and stuff there on the tail. The dimensions were on the sheet for the covering, and I was laying them all out anyway, so I glued that one on. These grommets back here for the rudder are vinyl, and they're teardrop shape, and they have a long slit in them, kind of where the cable comes through. The ones that go up there for the aileron cable are the same shape, but they just have a single hole in them. The other airframe, when I got the airplane from Cub Crafters, they didn't have those grommets on there. They just had a slit back here in the fabric of the tail for the rudder cables to come out, and then just a hole up there where the aileron cable comes out. And that worked fine, except the cable kind of rubbed on the fabric a little bit and made it kind of rough, and it was a potential spot for a tear. So the first time that I had my friends come up to do a 100 hour on the airplane, I don't remember whether it was when they did the 100-hour or when they did an annual, they decided that they needed to fix that. So Ron cut out some leather grommets to go back here on the tail and glued them on. The problem with that is that the paint job on that thing was polyurethane, specifically durethane. Stuff doesn't stick to it very well. Now I've got the same problem here. That's a nice black vinyl grommet there. It could be stuck on after everything else is all done on it, except that the finish on this is going to be polyurethane, and the stuff just doesn't stick to it very well. And so it's bonded on there with polytack, and it's vinyl, so the polytack kind of welds itself to it, just like it welds itself to the polybrush and stuff. Anyway, I went ahead and put it on the polybrush. I was thinking that I'd just put those on there and just go ahead and paint over them with the polybrush and the poly spray and the finished color and everything, and just paint right over them, and they would blend right in. They are kind of pretty, and they are kind of distinctive. They do stand out with that black. So I may change my mind when it comes down to starting to paint it. I may tape over those so they come off, and the black does contrast with the yellow or the finish of the airplane. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm just going to paint over those or whether I'm going to tape over them and let them show. I've got the grommet, seaplane grommet in at the bottom there. That drawing for the fabric covering only shows one on the tail or one on the belly, and I don't really see any place else to put any. I mean, I could put a couple more in different places on there, but that's where the water's going to run down to, is right there. Well, anyway, I got a pretty good hole in there, and I've got the grommet glued on there with a doily over the top of it. That's all set up. Well, I've gone over this whole bottom here, all the tapes here on the bottom with the iron, and got all the pinks and tapes down pretty good. I did part of the other side there, which would be the right side, as I did it with everything over like this at 270 degrees, so I was able to get the bottom here, the rear section of this right side. It gets pretty busy up here in the front, so that took a while to get that done. So we got 3 inspection cover openings there, and then the tapes across the diagonals on the bottom there, and the ones across the carry-through spars. That's all ironed down and all smooth and looks pretty good. Okay, I got both grommets on the left and right side glued on for the aileron cable to pass through. They're not exactly in the position that it showed on that drawing. You can see the lines there, the one line, that horizontal line that goes across there parallel with that lower longeron. That was 1 3/4 inches up from the bottom of the lower longeron. Well, I centered that grommet on that, and then it showed it being 1 7/8 inches forward of a line from the center of that lift strut attached fitting there. So you can see where the center line is there. That goes right through that grommet, and the 1 7/8 inches forward of it is, well, it's up there about 1 inch forward of the nose of that grommet. But when I projected a line through where that pulley's going to go in there, that didn't line up with the hole that's in the grommet, so I pulled that back a little ways. You could have gone ahead and punched another hole in it back farther in the grommet for that cable when we get ready to put it through there. In fact, we're going to have to open that hole up anyway, because that's just a pretty small hole going through there. It's probably 3/16. That's going to have to be opened up anyhow, but if I moved it forward, then there would be 2 holes in there. There'd be one where the cable comes through, plus the one that's pre-punched in that thing. It would have been better if it wasn't pre-punched. Anyway, I made a mark in there, lined that up with where the cable is going to come out on the pulley, and just slid that back there like that. But they're both glued on, so well, I'm pretty much done with the fuselage, the fabric on the fuselage. All the taping done and everything, got all the grommets on. I got the hole in the back and the seaplane grommet on back there. What I've been doing here is going over all the tapes, seams with iron. I've got the bottom and the right side done. I still need to do the left side and the top of the vertical fin. Everything else is pretty much gone over with the iron. Now what I do with the iron is go over all these pinked edges here and make sure they're all down nice and tight, and places where they cross, the tapes cross over one another, get it down nice and tight. These pinked edges, the pinking on them has a lot of, I don't know, end grain, a lot of fabric ends exposed, and they have a tendency to absorb a lot of the polybrush and poly spray too, as far as that goes. You know, what'll happen if they're not down perfectly tight, then the poly brush gathers up on those. It kind of collects on those, and it gets proud and rough on that edge. Try to keep those down as tight as possible so they don't collect the poly brush, and because everything you spray on there exaggerates anything that's any lumps or bumps on there. And of course, each one of these pinked edges is a lump and a bump. And then with all of the exposed end grain or exposed fabric there, the solvent in the poly brush and the poly spray gets absorbed more into that and causes them to swell up, and it'll also pull in more material that way. Again, the solvent in the poly brush and poly spray can loosen up these edges, any of these edges on here, if they're not down good and tight. Even if they are down tight, sometimes just having the solvent come down on there will loosen those up. Another thing that we do is where all of these tapes overlap each other, or where we have an end of a tape here, things like that, go over it with iron and push down on it. You can actually blend that end in so that when what we see is junctions in the tape. We'll see the end of this tape here, and we'll see the edge of this tape, and the pinked edges over here and stuff like that. Even though this tape goes over the top of it, you can see all that stuff now with just the poly brush on it. Once you spray, you get that iron down good and tight with all those edges all merged into each other. Then once you put the poly spray on though, all those seams and edges will just disappear. So the fuselage is done, except for ironing that left side and the top. And I've also got to go over all of the controls with the iron before I go put them in the spray booth. So, but anyway, I'm pretty much done with that. I do that a little bit at a time because it's kind of tedious and it takes up a lot of time going. You have to go over every one of those pinked spots on there. And anyway, I'm kind of moving on to the next stage, which is to make the paint booth.